Hello there. It's your girl Valerie Mason Chase again, and welcome to another episode of Marriage Beyond the Breach. So, I want to thank you, anyone who's listening now or listening later. And if you have not already done so, I would greatly appreciate if you would subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is Marriage Beyond the Breach. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. I have a TikTok account, but I don't do much with that because I'm still learning how to do TikTok. I don't know. I think TikTok is more of a young folk platform, and I am a straight boomer. So if you could just follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, I would greatly appreciate it. So tonight, as always, we have a what I think is a fascinating topic that we're going to be talking about. And this it's called, the thing we're going to talk about is something called limerence. And I have to say, I didn't always know what limerence was. I came across this word for the very first time probably about 7 or 8 years ago. It was during the time that the Cookie Man and I were separated, and I was a part of a Facebook group that had married people who were known as standers. I had a podcast on what it means to be a stander and stand in the gap for your marriage. If not, you go back and look at that. But anywho, and on this Facebook page is where I heard the word limerence for the first time. And I said, hey, what is that? So I looked it up, and I always thought that it was really fascinating. And the guest I have on tonight mentioned it in one of our supervisions. And so I said, you know what now? Maybe, how about let's do a podcast talking about limerence. So the guest I have tonight, and y'all know we always have some amazing guests on this show. And this young lady is no different. Now, she is one of our passionate people helpers over there at Mending Hearts Behavioral Health and Family Services. So I'm going to bring on my sister, none other than Miss Nancy Mays. Hey, Nancy.
Hi, Valerie.
How are you this evening?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I am so happy to have you here on this podcast. And hey, guys, just as I said, Nancy and I, we serve together over at Mending Hearts, and we have our supervisions together on Tuesday mornings. So I want you all who are here, just show some love to Miss Nancy Mays. And Nancy,
Thank you.
share with the viewers whatever you want to share about yourself, whatever
Mm,
you want to share.
wow, that's broad. What do I want to share? Well, I'm a believer. That's first and foremost.
Mm-hmm,
Live in the state of Missouri. We've
mm-hmm,
been here about 3 years. We have 6 kids. We have 2 grandkids. We have 3 grandkids. We have one that's in heaven.
mm,
And I'm just loving what I'm doing, helping people find healing, find meaning, find
mm-hmm,
support,
mm-hmm.
and deepen their walk with the Lord.
Yes, yes. So, oh, and Nancy, as she said, lives in Missouri. Now, is Missouri the show me state, or is that one of the other states?
It
It is.
is. It is the show me state.
Okay, I wasn't sure because every state has its own little nickname. But anywho, Nancy, thank you so much for being here. Hey, Miss Ollie, thank you for tuning in. Miss Ollie, you are such a faithful viewer. I really appreciate you because you are here almost every single Monday, and I really appreciate you being here, taking the time to show up and listen. And if you have any questions, you could put it in the chat. If you have any comments, if anyone who's watching, if you've had any experience with limerence, talk about it. Share it in the chat. So Nancy, we're going to dive right in.
Sure.
So for those who are listening, how do you define limerence? Exactly what is it?
Limerence, it's for me, it's hard to kind of really wrap my mind around what exactly it is
Mhm.
because there's so many things as you're learning what limerence is, it seems to encompass a lot of things that seem just to be typical, that like that
Right.
early stage of love, that euphoria,
Mm,
that excitement, or hopes and dreams. But what sets limerence aside from the typical rush of feelings and excitement and dreams of a new relationship
mhm.
is is when it gets to the point of not being reciprocated. My
Yeah.
understanding, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this,
Mhm.
and to the point of destabilization, where it just
Mm,
has you have so many intrusive thoughts, and it starts to kind of have a life of its own.
mhm, mhm.
One of the things that sets it apart from other things is they do say it's um, not intentional. It happens more on the subconscious level. That's harder for
Mhm.
me to understand because I feel like we can take all thoughts captive. So that's
Yeah.
another one of those areas that make it an interesting conversation piece or an interesting topic to research. The term was coined in, I believe it was in 79 by Dorothy Tanov, who wrote the book Love and Limerence, after she
Mhm.
did about a decade of research into why do some people really create these rich fantasy lives
Mhm.
and start to develop lives around these fantasies
Yeah.
that go beyond unrequited love.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay.
So there's
Yeah.
my long way around telling you what it is.
Yeah, and that's what to me what's so interesting about it because, as you said, it can kind of mimic, and in the context of a relationship, it could feel like it's genuine. It
Right.
can feel like the like you would feel in the early stages of a relationship, or people who say
Mhm.
that they are falling in love, so to speak. But can you speak to some of the characteristics, some of the differences that make that makes limerence differ from an authentic, healthy romantic attachment or relationship?
Well, the first difference is it often does not involve any kind of reciprocation at all.
Mhm,
So
mhm, mhm,
the other party isn't even aware that they're part of your fantasy.
mhm.
So that's a significant difference. It's hard to
Yeah.
truly fall in love with somebody. You are intentionally building a relationship with them.
Mhm, mhm.
Limerence in limerence, you're not doing that. Now you may actually know the person. You may actually it could be a coworker, it could be somebody is working with,
Mhm.
but the limerent object, that's the name for the term of the person who's the object of the limerence,
Yeah.
may not be aware that they are and that they are in this fantasy relationship with you.
Mhm.
So that's very different than a healthy relationship, than healthy growing and developing love with somebody.
Yeah.
It can also involve somebody who you don't even know. So that's another area of it that it's easy to kind of scratch your head over. But
Mhm, mhm.
developing this fantasy world with a movie star, with
Mm.
somebody that there's no relationship with at all.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so when we talk about, when we're looking at, is it love or is it limerence, think of this continuum between authentic relationship and this point of destabilization of being
Mm.
so
Mhm,
consumed,
mhm.
thoughts being consumed. Maybe people are even making decisions about what they're going to be doing with their life. They're making life decisions around this fantasy, and they may stop going to school or go to a different college because their limerent
Mm.
object is going there, or
Mhm,
or
mhm.
stop going to school, or learn how to cook a certain cuisine because they find out that their limerent object prefers this cuisine, or just so you can see how it can kind of create a life of its own, and
Yeah.
and but yet they're not pursuing a relationship with somebody.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Wow. And I
Yeah.
would also imagine that in a limerence relationship, if it's a, let's say it is with a real person and someone who is in a relationship, so to speak, with the limerent object, that when red flags show up, they are completely ignored.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that ties into that whole fantasy piece, because there's a lack of reality or realism to this relationship when there is a, I might say, a pseudo relationship,
Right.
because when there's no reciprocity, then that begs the question, is it really a relationship? When one person is just completely just overwhelmed by desire for this person and driven by wanting to have this emotional connection, and the other person is kind of just there, can we even really call that a relationship? What do you say?
Right. Right. That you bring up a really good point. And this is, I had shared with you that I have some experience through witnessing limerence in different areas in my
Mm-hmm.
life, and
Mm-hmm.
one is I've known somebody who met somebody online and went on a date,
Mm-hmm.
and this
Mm-hmm.
this person was just the man of her dreams. And they went on a couple of dates, and he made it pretty obvious that it wasn't working for him. It wasn't clicking.
Yeah.
And Valerie, she changed everything about her life for this person who
Mm-hmm.
actually was not interested in a relationship.
Yeah.
And when she would engage in conversation, in casual conversation with anybody else, she was actually talking as if these people were in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But he was not in this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's a little bit different than, I kind of went a different way than what you were talking about, because you were talking about when two people actually have a relationship with each other. And one is very limerent, which they end up with these expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as a believer, we'd call this idolatry, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So really having these expectations of this perfection, that somebody is going to come in and be this all in all. And
Mm-hmm.
that puts a lot of strain on a relationship.
It absolutely does. And, I think I said this in one of the previous podcasts. And that is why to me, just alarm bells go off when I hear one person say, oh, he is my everything. Oh, she is my everything. To me, that is sound the alarm. There's something wrong here. Houston, we have a problem,
Right.
because no one is
Right.
meant to be our everything like that. I mean, even our
Mm-hmm.
spouses are meant to be our everything, because we are meant to have other relationships, other involvement, and the only person that I know of who can really, really and truly be our everything is God Himself. I don't know any other human who has the capacity to do that in reality. Now, we may say that, but that doesn't make it so. Just
Right.
because we say that this person is our everything, and to me, that gets kind of scary. Um, because it puts so much pressure and burden on the other individual. Let's say you are in a relationship with someone and you
Mm-hmm.
say to him or her, oh, you're my everything. Oh, I can't imagine living without you. I can't imagine my life without you. That puts a lot of pressure on that other person, because
Mm-hmm.
now they've got
Mm-hmm.
these big shoes to fill that they are incapable of filling. So
Yes.
I don't know if that probably in some ways falls into the category of a limerent relationship, but I think it's scary. So have you heard someone say that their spouse, their partner, or whatever is their everything? And what's your reaction to that?
I'm like you, Valerie. My my first thought is idolatry. Nothing
Yeah,
is supposed to be our everything.
right.
Nothing but God can be our everything. And
Mm-hmm,
the truth
mm-hmm,
is, we enter into different relationships for different reasons. So
right.
there is some truth of the fact that there's something here that you are meeting some sort of a need, what
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm,
friendship. marriage, it doesn't really matter what the relationship is. There
Yeah.
is reciprocity, and we are receiving, and we are, give and take.
Hmm.
And we're putting into a relationship, we're also receiving from a relationship. And where it gets unhealthy, where it really becomes limerence is when there's just this, that's just, it's too big sometimes to explain, but as you said, having this idea that this person is going to be everything,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is going to solve all my problems, is going to be
Hmm.
the perfect person. We are never going to fight. We are never going to this. We're going to do all these things.
Mm.
You said you want to spend your life with me, so that means we're going to travel the world, and you're going to buy me a
Mm.
car. And I mean, I'm just throwing
Mm.
stuff out there, but
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
have a picture of
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
of what their life is going to be like. And when you're limerent, you attach that picture to that person.
To that person. Right. Right.
Right.
And I
And
think
they
that's
don't
why.
even know they're part
Sorry.
of your story.
Exactly. Um, and I think just what you said in describing that attachment and the person who's experiencing limerence having this conversation with themselves and visualizing all this stuff. I think that's why I saw that, because I saw that word used a lot on the Facebook group that I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier. And it was always used in relation to the uh, wayward spouse
Hmm.
and the partner with whom they had developed the adulterous relationship.
Sure.
The standard would describe them as being in limerence or them having a limerent relationship, and it kind of makes sense because a lot of times when there is infidelity, the unfaithful partner will have all these visions and attach all this stuff to the affair partner, thinking that he or she can fill all this stuff and meet all these needs because the spouse isn't doing it. But
Hmm.
when you peel back the layers, the affair partner ain't doing it either. And it's not based in reality. A lot of
Right.
it based in the story that the unfaithful partner tells themselves about that relationship.
Right.
And I think that limerence occurs a lot when they're in an adulterous relationship. What are your thoughts
Right.
on
I think you're right, very much on that. When people get to the point of an adulterous relationship, there's a lot of unchecked boxes, right? There's a lot of things that they're dealing with, whatever it is, whether this is
it?
old trauma resurfacing or just unmet needs of the day,
Yeah.
or we go through so many stages in our life, so just having those unmet needs, and
Mhm.
believing the grass is greener somewhere else, right? There's the
Right.
narrative that we've grown up believing, right? That's a saying that's been around forever.
Hmm.
And believing, well, that person over there will probably be able to meet all of these needs, and especially because she smiled at me, right? Or he waved at me, or he picked up my, the box I dropped, and so that must mean that he's going to
Yeah.
give me the
Yeah.
moon. And I mean, this is how almost silly, and I don't want to say silly, because the truth is this is a real issue.
Yeah.
And this really is something that people really struggle with.
Hmm.
And they may even know that it's kind of nuts. Like, they may know this probably isn't right, but yet they still fall
Yeah.
into this pattern. And so when you get into the infidelity, what it really comes down to, Valerie, is it's hard work to work through a
Hmm.
relationship.
Hmm. Hmm.
And limerence can give you that outlet that doesn't require any work,
Right. Right.
right? And so, adultery can become an outlet that's easy
Hmm. Hmm.
until it needs work, right? Until there's reciprocation that's needed there, until real work has to take place in that relationship. Every
Yeah.
relationship's going to need work.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that is so true. But most adulterous relationships, at least in the beginning, don't require any work beyond the lies that you have to tell your spouse in order to be out there.
Right.
Other than
Right.
that, it doesn't require a whole
Mhm.
lot of work.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wonder, you brought up earlier the avoiding the red flags. I wonder how many mistresses, as an example, who aren't, they're not attached to anybody. So they're free to be in a relationship, who are a long-term partner, mistress of somebody who's in a relationship. He
Mm-hmm.
can't
Mm-hmm.
give her everything that she really desires, but he's
Yeah.
feeding this fantasy that
Yeah.
somehow happily ever after is really going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And a woman or a man in this position who's kind of waiting for the demise of a relationship, there's got to be some level of limerence there of believing they're stalling their life for
Yeah.
sometimes decades, waiting,
Yeah.
waiting for the person to finally come and be that knight in shining armor, or finally come and fulfill the relationship,
Yeah.
while they're, so how else do you wait that long?
That's true. There's got to be something there that's causing them to remain the side piece for 5 years or 10 years, 15, 20, or whatever.
Mhm.
And it's really sad. I mean, I know the mistress is who she is and doing what she does, but it's really sad. And I remember during my nursing career, especially when I was working in ICU. And there would be a gentleman who is now in ICU. He's unresponsive. He's on the ventilator. He's married, but he and his wife haven't been together for years, but he's still married to his wife. But he's been living with the side piece for a number of years.
Mm.
But the wife is still the legal next of kin. The wife can still call the shots. And I have seen it on numerous occasions where the wife would come in, and now this woman that's been living with this husband for all these years, she's not allowed to come see him. If he had any property, it didn't even matter if they had had it together. The wife can now take ownership of so many things, especially if
Mhm.
he had property that was in just his name. The side piece is out. So
Right.
that, what you described is an absolute fantasy. And what, I wonder this about a lot of things.
Mhm.
What is the conversation that someone has to have with themselves in order to remain in that situation as the side piece for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years?
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
I wonder about that, because they've got to be saying something to themselves.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. I often wonder that too. I mean, because
Hmm. Hmm.
there's there's so many layers on that. So many layers. Fortunately, I haven't had to counsel somebody through that.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't had to counsel anyone who was the side piece, but I
Mhm.
have counseled couples where there was infidelity and it was ongoing. And I just had to say, well, if you're not going to stop, to me, there's no point in doing couples counseling
Right.
if one of the partners is still committing adultery. It's useless. So I had to just
Mhm.
cut ties and say, listen, unless and until you're ready to give up that outside relationship, now someone else may agree to counsel you, but it won't be me, because
Right.
it's a waste of time, because you are dividing your attentions over here while you're saying, oh, I want to work on my marriage and I want to reconcile with my spouse. No, for me, that's a no-no. What about you, Nan?
I agree. I agree. Yes. I've not worked with anybody who's been actively in an affair. I have worked with couples who've gone through infidelity, but
Mm-hmm.
not who are actively in it, to my knowledge.
To your knowledge, absolutely. And I have to
Mhm.
tell you, in the beginning, with a couple of these couples, I wasn't aware that one of
Mhm.
the spouses was still engaged in infidelity. But once I became aware of it, that's it. We are not going any
Right.
further with this,
Right.
because it's a waste of time. You're lying to your wife, and you were lying to me in the beginning when we first
Mhm.
started counseling. Because
Mhm.
listen, when anytime a couple comes in for counseling, and I'm their counselor, and they say that there's been infidelity, one of the first things I ask, have you ended it with the other person? Have
Yeah.
you ended it? Now that doesn't mean they're gonna tell me the truth, because obviously they be
Hmm.
lying sometimes. But I definitely want that out there. I
Right.
want it on the record that I have asked this question and this is how they responded. If they say they've ended it with the affair partner, okay, then we can proceed. But once I become aware that it's still going on, then no, we're through. That doesn't work for me. I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that, and it's not fair to the other partner either.
Right. No, it's
It's
not.
not fair. So,
Hmm.
thinking about limerence, are there some individuals who may be more prone to limerence than others? Are there common personality traits or anything that may make some individuals more prone than others?
So that's interesting. As I did some research in preparation for being here tonight, um, I thought maybe there'd be a connection to different attachment styles,
Mm,
and interesting. There's not. It doesn't seem to be more with women or more with men. It doesn't seem
right.
to be necessarily with avoidant attachment or anxious attachment.
Hmm.
It's it, Now it's rare for a securely attached person. So
Right.
now that leads us to what are some of the common um, the common markers, who typically ends up being
Hmm.
limerent. And one of the first things are emotional neglect or
Mm,
abuse growing up, which makes sense. Makes sense. When you are deeply neglected emotionally, especially as a child, what do
hmm.
we do to cope?
Mm,
What do we do to cope? Maybe we learn to read, watch the Disney movies. That's enough to teach limerence.
hmm.
And what, where, where do we, what do we develop as our coping skills?
Hmm. Hmm.
Oftentimes there's a fantasy. Oftentimes there's some level of something where how else are we meeting those needs? Because the truth is man's not good alone. We need connection.
Right. Right.
And when we're not getting connection, where does this develop? And one of my I'll just call it kind of a fun example
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
childhood from childhood for me, looking back, I'm like, well, that was limerence. Now, okay, to be fair, what am I, 11, 12 years old, sixth grade, looking at the poster of Michael Jackson and imagining that he's just going to walk into
Hmm.
my room and tell me
Hmm.
that he's been waiting for me his whole life. I'm 11, so his whole life,
Hmm.
and we were going to be happily ever after. And and it's a naive, youthful fantasy. But
Yeah.
the thing is, what does it really tell you? If you look at what you're limerent about, people who are struggling with limerence, if you look at what you're limerent about, it's going to point the flashlight to where the wound is.
Right. Right.
That wound of I wanted to be seen. That's all I
Hmm.
wanted, was to be seen,
Hmm.
and to be important. And so there's my story. Dad left when I was young and didn't have that male um, figure that spoke life into me in my youth. And so that sets you up for, these emotional needs. All roads
Yeah.
lead to trauma. All roads lead to trauma. I mean,
Right.
I believe that. And so these different things, how they play out in our life, most of them, you pull that thread and it's going to take you back to a trauma source.
Yeah. I agree. It's so interesting that you said all roads lead to trauma. I was watching a particular podcast. I don't even remember whose podcast it was, but the guest was saying, making some not so flattering comments about women. And I don't typically comment when I see podcasts. I rarely do it, but something rolls up in me and I responded. And part of what I said is that the gentleman sounds as if he has been in a relationship where he was deeply wounded and maybe, consider the possibility of getting some help to heal. Oh my
Mhm.
God. Did they drag my behind? They dragged me because of the men, not all of them, but a lot of the men dragged me for my comment. And one person said, one guy said that I was talking pure BS. Here you come with that BS again. Men don't have time for that because men don't heal. Well, I think that directly speaks to
Mm,
what I just said. And
right.
so I think you are right that so often when there is dysfunction in our personal lives, in our romantic lives, or in our professional lives, to use your words, all roads lead to trauma.
Hmm.
But the time is not taken, or we don't recognize it
Right.
in order to try to heal those wounds and deal with the trauma. I think so many relationships would not be as dysfunctional and toxic as they are if
Yeah.
we would just take the time to just investigate, where is this coming
Right.
from?
Right.
Where is this coming from? And so
Hmm.
often, Nancy, as you said, it's related to traumas, but we've got
Right.
to be willing to do something about it. And unfortunately, like the guy said, he said, men don't heal. He said they don't
Mhm.
have time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
What's interesting is in other areas in our life, if you had a pain in your
Mm,
elbow that was not going away, and no
yeah.
matter what you did, it was there, and it shows up no matter what position you are in, whether you're asleep or you're
Mhm.
awake, whether you're using it or you're not, and it's going on and on and on, and months go by. Usually, you've seen a doctor.
Right.
And you're saying, what is this? Here's the symptoms. What is it? And you're at least trying to investigate. What can it be? Is it
Right.
is it the nerve? Is it muscle? Is it bone? What is
Hmm.
it? And
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
all recognize in our body, that makes sense. That's what we
Right.
do. We don't want to live with pain. But for
Hmm.
some reason, there's a disconnect when it comes to emotional and heart wounds. We don't want to acknowledge that there's pain. But
Yes.
all of these symptoms, Valerie, if you go to the doctor and you say, "This is why I'm here," and you give them 5 symptoms, and he says, it sounds like it's either this, or this, and I'm betting it's this, so why don't we test
Hmm.
this first? And we
Yeah.
go, "Okay." When people come into therapy and they say, "I'm struggling with this, or this," here's the truth. Those symptoms, they all point to trauma. They all point to
Trauma.
something. And it does remanifest itself. It is
Okay.
manifesting itself later in life. It is causing how you're showing up in life, or
Yeah.
back to limerence. Why is it that the limerent fantasy is that this person is going to meet all of these needs? Well, why
Mm,
are those needs there?
right. Yeah.
And
So
why are you not able to actually make your affections known to the limerent object? Why aren't you
true.
able to take the steps to see if it can be reciprocated? What keeps you from doing that? Where
Mhm.
did the development not take place
Yeah.
for you to have interaction and relationship? And so it kind of makes sense when you look at it from the trauma perspective.
Yeah. It does. It makes a great deal of sense. And you are so right that we pay attention to physical pain, but we sometimes will ignore emotional pain and
Hmm.
just think that we just have to just muscle through it, act like it's not there. Time heals all wounds. Well, no, time alone don't heal anything. Not even in
Yeah,
our physical bodies. I mean, you
that's
have
right.
to do something along with the time in order
Hmm.
to facilitate healing. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing when we have emotional pains, and it's real. I think sometimes people struggle with that term trauma because they think they had to either have had to be in physically abused, they had to be had a sexual trauma, or something to that effect. But there
Right.
are many ways in which someone could
Yeah.
be traumatized,
Mhm.
especially in our youth and in our family of origin. Maybe somebody didn't knock you upside the head. Nobody molested you, but there are still things that could have occurred in your life that were traumatic and that have a lasting
Mhm.
effect. And I think some people
Mhm.
run away from that because they say, oh, well, this
Right.
didn't happen and that didn't happen, so only this happened. And they don't consider
Right.
that to be traumatic.
Right.
Yeah.
That that is so paramount right there. And sometimes it can be things that are almost they seem on the surface insignificant. Like
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't
Hmm.
consider this to be, sexual violation or physical abuse. But what about, I mean, as a simple question, did you ever walk into a room and somebody's face lit up just because you were there? Were you delighted in? When
Mm-hmm.
you just kinda stop and think about that, it's how
Yeah,
many people grew up and never experienced somebody being delighted in them. You know what, Valerie? That's a wound.
that
That
is.
is a wound, and it's a
Wow.
wound that as a believer
Hmm.
typically leads to people having this perception that God doesn't delight in them.
Right.
They've never
Right.
experienced somebody being delighted in them. I mean, there there's several things that we can pick out that are that are like that if
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
didn't get those are little wounds,
Yeah.
and it can be significant.
It can be. It can be. That comment you just made about someone's face lighting up when you walk into a room. I remember many, many years ago, this had to have been at least 30 years ago.
Mhm,
Um, a good friend of my husband had made a comment because he and I were sitting somewhere waiting for my husband. And when my husband walked in, I didn't even realize that my face lit up. And my husband said, wow, that's what I want. I want to be in a relationship with someone whose face lights up like
right.
yours, Val, when your cookie man walks into the room. And I didn't even realize that.
Mhm,
So yeah, that I think
mhm,
that means a lot when you can
mhm,
see the joy on someone's face, on the face of
mhm,
someone that you love, just
right,
because of your presence. That's
right,
deep.
right, yeah,
That is
and
really, really deep. Mhm.
how many people would say, "No, actually, when I walked in the room, they looked
Yeah,
away."
yeah,
That's a wound. That
yeah,
is just as bad as smacking somebody upside the head.
absolutely.
Mhm, you
It
know?
definitely is. Wow,
Mhm.
wow.
So then you
So,
talk about
I'm
limerence,
sorry.
and you kind of wonder with limerence, what would somebody with that wound, what are they probably gonna be limerent about?
Mm, yeah.
So this new coworker who just showed up, when I ran into him in the break room, he said, "Hey, how are you doing today?"
Mm,
And,
mhm.
oh, he saw me. He
Yes.
saw me. He lit up, and all of a sudden, so now limerence is gonna probably be based on how much he delights in her. And,
Yeah,
and happily ever after is gonna look like this, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I mean, it's easy to see how these things start to interweave themselves.
Mhm, mhm. It absolutely is, but, you know, but on the flip side, when let's say it's someone who is naturally just has this, gregarious, big personality, and they interact with individuals of both genders in that manner, um, and someone just unknowingly kind of gravitates towards that or grasps that and hangs
Mhm,
on to that and attaches in a limerent way.
mhm,
uh, I think that that's so unfortunate because how now we have to kind of reel ourselves in. And I'm speaking when I said we because that's kind of personality that I have. I talk to
mhm,
everybody. I'm out in the
right,
street sometimes, and I'll see a guy, and I'll say, "Oh my God, that outfit looks so nice on you. And where did you get it? Or those shoes are so nice. Where did you get those shoes? I would like to have to get that for my husband." And my husband
mhm,
tells me all the time, Val, you got to stop doing that because you don't know what these guys are thinking. And
yeah,
to me, it's just innocent because that's my personality. I see women in the street, the same thing. I'll compliment them. Oh my goodness, you are wearing that dress. Your hair looks so beautiful. And my husband has told me to kind of dial it back, and I've been attempting to do that. But I gotta say, it's kind of difficult.
Right, right. And it's just who you are. You're being who you are, and you care about people, you love people, you're fun, big personality. It would be really easy to just happen to brush shoulders with somebody, or somebody you see frequently in church who
Yeah.
it just clicks that she always tells me
Mm,
I look nice. Oh, so and in comes this secret fantasy romance in their head.
mm. Yeah, yeah.
Over these, that's what happens with limerence.
That's
And
exactly
you
what
can
happens.
become the object. The limerent object is the person
Yeah.
who somebody else is limerent over. And this can last for months to years. And there's the possibility of there never being an actual relationship.
Mm,
Um, but to one person, there can be this perception that there's this deep, intimate relationship,
yeah.
and this person's just absolutely perfect. They idealize them.
Hmm.
Mm.
Wow. So that limerence is no joke.
It is not any joke. You are right. You are right.
It is no joke, but it
Mhm.
has the potential to be so destructive,
Mhm.
and more self-destructive than anything.
Right. Well, I imagine it could be more than self-destructive. I mean, if somebody started to make decisions to live near somebody or work in a
Mm,
specific place just to be
mhm.
near them and just to have this obsession with this person, and this person just out of friendliness or kindness, if they're not aware that they're the limerent object, could
Yeah.
be feeding something they're not aware they're feeding.
Mhm. That is so true. That is so true. I mean, I'm on the edge of, how do you characterize limerence? Would you say it is a mental illness? Would you say it's on the line? Does it border in terms of being a mental illness? What do you think, Nan?
I do not know.
Oh,
I don't know that we could quite excuse me.
mhm.
I like to be careful not to just classify things.
Uh-huh.
It's so easy to want to just classify
Mhm.
everything. And I guess it would be on a spectrum of how destabilizing is it? Because if there's somebody who actually let's just say somebody went as far as to buy the house next door
Mhm.
of their limit object just to be close to them, making major life decisions to maintain this limerent relationship,
Mhm.
um, that that could probably fall under some sort of mental disorder. I'm not sure
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
but I think that you or I, if we were working with a client who shared all these decisions they've made, for a non genuine relationship, there wasn't
Mhm.
actually a
Mhm.
relationship, um, we would probably be wondering what might be there.
Yeah, what's underneath it all?
Yeah, yeah, and whether or not there's actually some sort of a mental health disorder.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
mhm,
I think
mm,
when someone already has a mental health disorder, attaches onto someone in a limerent way, has the potential to be dangerous.
sure, I imagine it could.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I don't.
yeah,
I guess I wouldn't go as far as, I would say that it could have the potential if
mhm,
somebody was dangerous, but I don't think it automatically would be in a dangerous category, you know?
right. Yeah. Limerence in and of itself is not dangerous, but
Mhm.
if it shows up in someone who is already predisposed to be dangerous or has some sort of mental health issue that can result in them becoming dangerous when they attach onto someone in a limerent way. That could be concerning. Yes.
I could get behind that.
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
could think that. I mean, if we, limerence happens oftentimes with people who somebody doesn't even know. So you think of movie stars, you think of people who already are baseball players or whatever, and you
Yes.
do hear stories of people who try to find ways into their person's life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that is concerning. It is concerning.
Yeah. Yeah. So looking at it from a clinical perspective, what might be happening in the brain or the body during limerence when someone has attached onto someone in a limerent way? What might be going on?
Hmm. Are you wondering, like, what would I explore with a client if I had a client that was limerent?
Yeah, what might be going on neurologically? Are there
Yeah.
certain hormones that are released as
Well, I'm
in
sure there's
other
a lot of
relationships?
dopamine.
Yes, that's where I'm going.
There's probably some oxytocin just
Yeah.
because, you just made eye contact with your limerent object.
Hmm, hmm.
And, and those hormones, of course, are the connection hormones. And so that could probably further things. To be honest, I didn't really look at it from that aspect.
Hmm.
Yeah. One of the things that was slightly, and I had shared this in the beginning, confusing to me, and because I know so little about limerence, I feel like I know just enough to probably only have more questions than
Hmm.
answers. Is that the thought that it is like these are automatic thoughts that
Hmm.
are outside of somebody's control. I mean, they're actually one of the definitions was that, yeah, that it was involuntary. And
Hmm. Hmm.
it's just it's hard for me to see that. It's hard for me to see that part, for
Hmm.
somebody to say that I can't help it. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I get that. I struggle with accepting the I can't help it about a lot of things.
Mhm.
Um, just because we have those automatic thoughts or automatic responses does not necessarily mean that we can't help it, especially as a believer.
Mhm.
I have to believe and trust that there are ways to address anything from a spiritual perspective.
Right.
And I
Even
think we
thoughts.
limit ourselves. Even thoughts. There are
Right.
ways that we can deal with that. Now,
Mhm.
even for non-believers, there are ways to address
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why one of my spiritual fathers always says, and I remember there was something he and I were having a conversation, and I said, "Oh, I can't do so and so." He said, "No, Valerie, that's your choice. You were choosing to not do so and so because to say that you can't is not
Right.
accurate." And I said, "Wow."
Right.
I said, "You know what? You are absolutely right."
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I catch myself sometimes when I say, "Well, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or I can't do the other thing," and look at it through a different lens and say, "Okay, Val, is it really that you can't do this? Or is this the choice that you were making?
Is it you won't?
Is it you won't?"
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think
Mhm.
if we questioned that statement more frequently, we would come up with a different response and maybe look at
Right.
look at things differently. I say this a lot to the couples that I counsel when they say, "Oh, well, we can't communicate it, we can't have this conversation, and we can't talk about money, and we can't talk about sex, and we can't talk about this." And I say, "Oh, yeah, you can, but the two of you
Mhm.
are making a choice to not have a calm, rational conversation
Right.
about it. It isn't that you can't, because
Mhm.
you're both human, you both have the capacity to have rational conversations because you do it with other individuals.
Right.
So that means you have the capacity. Because if you didn't have the capacity, then you would not be able to do it with anybody. But you do it at work. You know how to mind your tongue. You know how to not touch your boss. You know how to not raise your voice at your coworker down the hall because
Mhm.
they stole your pen, or how to not act out in the supermarket when somebody jumps in front of you.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so we have the capacity for these things, but we don't always make the choice when it comes
Right.
to these things. So
Mhm.
I want to talk next about some of the stages. What are the stages of limerence?
Oh, wow. So some of the stages is, I can't even be not really clear on that. I don't think I can answer that clearly. Um,
Mhm.
they do say that it can last anywhere from 6 months to 3 years.
Yeah.
It sounds like it does sound like there's the idealization stage,
Yeah.
and the early stage, um, and whether it's short or it's long,
Uh-huh.
if there is profession along the way, or somehow there is an absolute barrier of some
Mm.
sort, like the person
Yeah.
leaves or cuts it off or whatever. One of the stages that then takes place is that whoever was limerent may go from that 100 to 0. It's like this
Right.
person was everything to nothing. And so there is that cutoff and that devaluing stage,
Yeah.
which was an interesting thing to think about the cycle in there, because that's one of the cycles that comes up with borderline personality, is
Right.
it mirrors some of that. So that's an
Yeah.
interesting thought.
It absolutely is.
Mhm.
When I was when I was looking it up and thinking about uh stages, and I want to talk about patterns next. Let me just I gotta write
Mhm.
this down, because if I don't write it down, I probably forget. Um,
Mhm.
and one in one article I read, it talked about three stages. That initiation stage, which you just described in the beginning, they kind of feel a spark. They have the initial attraction. That's when the fantasy starts
Mhm.
to build. Um, and then there is what's known as the crystallization, or that's the peak stage, where there's the obsession gets deeper. Sometimes there's an emotional dependency. They're looking for some reciprocation, but it's not happening. There's further um, idealization. I hope I'm saying this word right. Idealization, is that the right? Am I saying it
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
You're
Mhm.
idealizing the person upon whom you have attached. Sometimes there could be some mood swings that happen during this crystallization stage, because there is that hope that is met with rejection. And
Mhm.
so that can result in the person who is limerent having some mood swings. And as you described, that last phase, deterioration, is when limerence fades, because
Mhm.
eventually it's going to fade,
Mhm.
because it's not real.
Yep.
So it's not going to last forever. There could be some disillusionment that happens. They realize there's not going to be any reciprocity. And the individual can even go through a period of grief, because
Right.
grief at the loss of this person,
Mhm.
or if there was some sort of pseudo relationship, loss of
Mhm.
that relationship. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there are stages to it. And what I want to say about patterns, um, we were talking earlier about um, all roads leading back to trauma. And I think sometimes it's helpful for us, and by us, I mean all humans, to make note of the patterns in our life, especially as it
Yeah.
pertains to relationship. Um,
Mhm.
I read something once. Um, oh gosh, I can't remember who said it, but speaking from a woman's perspective, sometimes we will just have the same man in a different pair of pants. So the same, he's got the same
Yeah.
characteristics and everything.
Right.
So if we can pay attention to those patterns, because we all
Mm.
have them, in our relationships because we tend to gravitate, especially when our wounds remain unhealed. We tend to
Right.
gravitate towards certain types of individuals. So, what do you have to say to that, Nancy, about patterns?
I think that you're absolutely correct. Patterns are everything,
Mm-hmm.
but and it's in more areas, Valerie, than just our intimate relationships.
Right.
I can't help but think, and I know limerence defined does not encompass these other areas, but it's hard for me to not also see these patterns in other ways because it could be
Yeah.
friendships. Oh,
Right.
I just met this person, and we are like sisters from like we were separated at birth, and everything's
Mm-hmm.
so perfect, and you can
Mm-hmm.
idolize friendships and have this belief that we're going to do life together from here on out,
Yeah.
and be an overwhelming friend. Or what about the same pattern being applied to that perfect job, and
Right.
it's going to just be so perfect there, and it's going to be, and you see somebody who jumps from job to job to job to job,
Mm.
and the story is always how perfect it is in the beginning, and then it's crystallized, and then how well, it just wasn't right because they weren't right, not because it wasn't right,
Right.
and then the pattern is there, and so sometimes these patterns, you'll see the same pattern with somebody who jumps from the same man in different pants over and
Mm-hmm.
over again. Do they have that pattern in other areas of their life too?
Yeah. Probably.
Mhm.
Yeah. Probably. You know, I just remember something when you were talking about the possibility of limerence um, showing up in friendships as well. There was a movie maybe 25 years ago, could be longer,
Mhm.
called Single White Female. Do you remember that movie? That would
I
be a limerence
do.
relationship.
I vaguely, very
Yeah,
vaguely remember that. Mhm.
because that looking at it now, remembering the plot of that movie, that could have been categorized as a limerent relationship because
Right.
one woman moved into another apartment. The phrase single white female came from the ad, back in the day when they'd
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
ads in the paper for apartments and they said, okay, single white female. And that was the name of the movie as well. And so this
Right.
woman moved in and she immediately attached onto the initial occupant of the apartment, and it
Mhm.
got to be dangerous at the end. It was kind of,
Yeah.
but thinking about that, that could be perceived
Mhm.
as a limit relationship. I mean, she even started to dress like her, she did her hair like her, and she started to
Mhm.
mimic every aspect of
Right.
this other woman's life.
Right.
Yeah. So do
Yeah.
you think something like
So
that could be limerent?
mhm. I I I personally, in learning about limerence, it's like I've seen people with these behaviors in other relationships,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
maybe it doesn't fall under the definition, but the pattern sure is similar.
Yeah. So if
Yeah.
someone is in a limerent relationship, they're experiencing it. How do you get out of it? What does recovery
I
look
would
like?
I would say the first thing, like anything else, is being honest.
Mm.
Being honest and recognizing, I do that. I seem to do that. I seem
Mhm.
to idolize, or I seem to read into interactions, that the eye contact with the guy at work, or how little things become a full story.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
could be a flag, that the part of the pattern. And then the next thing is to find some support, find some people that you can actually really talk to and be honest about, and evaluate. Hey, you know what? I kind of this guy said this to me today, and my head took it here. And
Mhm.
does that seem right? Does that seem, I mean, if I called you, Valerie, and said, so my neighbor, when I walked by, he waved and said, "Hey, how you doing today?" And I could have swore that he wants to ask me out. You'd
Mm.
probably say, maybe he was just saying, "Hi, have a good day."
Right.
Right? Now,
Mhm.
if I gave if there was a different description, if he said, "So, you single?" Okay. Now maybe there was some validity to that
Yeah.
thought. And so having people that you can be honest about, I tend to kind of make up. I tend to like to really see the good in everything,
Mm,
and 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 my mind may run off with this. So can you help me kind of balance this out, or tell me
mm,
if I'm kind of overthinking this? Get a therapist. Find somebody that you can talk to. Look into limerence, look into understanding it. There's a lot of good information out there, a lot of good
mm.
YouTubes. And it's good to kind of evaluate, is that really what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that is why, that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have people in our life who will tell us the truth.
Right.
And not just
Amen.
go along with whatever we say, whatever we do. I
Right.
remember one time I did something really, really stupid, and two of my closest friends didn't say anything about it. So when I came to myself, like the prodigal son, I said to them, "How in the world could you all let me be so stupid? Y'all didn't say
Right.
anything." I was really pissed off at them. How
Yeah.
did you not say anything? Didn't you see how stupid I was being? Didn't you see the mistakes that I was making? And they just said, "Well, we could see it, but we didn't want to say anything." I said, "Listen, let me tell y'all something. I am deputizing the both of y'all here on out, henceforth and forevermore. When you
Mhm.
see me do something stupid or something you even think is stupid,
Right.
please say something. Don't let me just go off the deep end, because there are times in our life
Mhm.
when we're not thinking rationally, especially when we are going through emotional turmoil
Right.
or something that is catastrophic, or if we're grieving or something. You don't always make the best choices.
Mhm.
You need to have those people in your life who are going to tell you the truth. Yeah, so that's really
Yeah.
important. I mean, unless you hear
Amen.
me talk about Idris Elba. If you hear me talk about Idris Elba, you can leave me alone. But other than that,
I am with you. I am with you on that for sure. If you do not have friends that you can call and who will tell you the truth,
mm,
you don't need to get new friends. Just recognize the friends you have are not the ones who's going to be iron sharpening iron. But
right,
find yourself some who are going to tell you the truth.
yeah,
And I have two people in my life at this point
mm,
that have been in there for over 20 years, who I purposefully will call when I'm having when I need truth, because they'll give it to
mhm,
me.
yeah,
And
yeah,
because I know what friends to go to if I want a pat on the back.
right,
Who's going to say,
yeah,
oh, well, oh, yeah. I mean, I know who's going to give me that.
mhm,
But I
mhm,
don't need that. I don't need
right.
that when I need truth.
You need truth.
So,
Yeah. My
mhm.
sister Jackie is that person for me. She will tell me the truth every single time. She'll call me out on things. There have been times when I will call her. She's my confidant. That's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
best bestie, my sister.
Mhm.
I'll share things with her that I wouldn't share with anybody else in the universe. And sometimes I'll call her and I'm venting about the Cookie Man,
Mhm.
and she'll say, "Val, okay, just stop, just stop. Okay, what did you do? No, Val,
Mhm.
no, you are not right, Val." And I'm saying, "But wait a minute, you're supposed to be on my side."
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got a girlfriend named Rosie who we, in
Mhm.
the very beginning of our friendship, almost 30 years ago, we prayed together and we said, we gave each other permission. We actually made a vow to each other that we will always direct each other to the Lord first.
Mm,
And that was kind of the pact that we made,
yeah.
and we have stood by that. And there are so many times, Val, I am sure that I'm over here doing this. I'm sure she just puts her phone down and walks away for 10 minutes. But she'll let me say all the things, and
Yeah.
and then she'll go, okay, you ready? Are you sitting
Mhm.
down? And sometimes I say, no, I'm not. I'll call you back.
But you're not ready to
Because
hear it.
I know it's coming, and other times I'm like, "Yeah, I'm ready." Sometimes
Yeah.
I listen, and a lot of times I hear what she says, and I need a minute. I need a minute
Mhm.
to take it in, because I know she's right. And she loves the Lord. That's the key. She loves the
That
Lord.
is
She knows the
key.
Lord. And so I can trust. I don't think she's ever given me advice I couldn't trust.
Mm, wow. That is
So,
deep. And that is so special. That
mhm.
is so, so special. Absolutely. So, Nancy, um, what would you like to say in terms of summarizing Limerence and any
Mm.
words of encouragement or recommendations for anyone who may
So
find themselves in this situation?
I guess the first thing is know that love and limerence are different.
Mm-hmm.
Not every little tiny fantasy is limerence. And limerence is something that can be overcome if you recognize this is something you do. You can work through it. You can work through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not unfamiliar. This isn't really a new thing. Maybe it's just a new word that was coined
Right.
in 79.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing new under the sun, nothing new to
Right.
man. And so it's just another way we play out our life. And if it's something that somebody's struggling with, get real about it. Get real, do the work to have real relationships, because you deserve love too. You deserve real love.
Mm-hmm.
And so learn how to give and to receive real love. I have to, and that's probably something I didn't touch on, as I kind of see in limerence. I kind of have my own question. I wonder how much of it is rooted in the inability to receive, fear of
Mm-hmm.
receiving, and underneath that, the fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. Starting to really peel those fears back,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so learning to receive the love of God. And if you don't know the Lord, reach out to Valerie, reach out to somebody. Reach out to somebody, because he delights in you.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Wow. This was a wonderful, wonderful conversation, Nancy. Thank you so, 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 so much for being
You're
here.
welcome.
I'm just letting you know, I will be reaching out to you again. I'm already starting to, um, what's the word I want to say? Plan topics for the next season, because I take off during the summer, July and August.
Mhm.
I take
Good.
off and I resume either sometime in early to late September. And I'm already looking at some topics. So when I have the calendar halfway filled, usually I'll do that over the summer and I reach out. So you'll be hearing from me, because I would love, love, love to have you back again. I appreciate you
Thank you.
so, so much. My colleague, my sister in Christ out there in Missouri. I've never been to Missouri, but now I have a reason to come there.
Come. Come. It'd be
Thanks again,
wonderful.
Nancy. And thanks again,
Thank
anyone
you.
who's watching now or later. And again, if you haven't already done so, I would appreciate subscribing to the YouTube channel, Marriage Beyond the Breach. And come back next week. Next week, our topic is on emotional intelligence. And I have two brand spanking new guests that are going to be on, along with the familiar guest. So I appreciate all of you. And I will see you on next week. And I love you. Love you. I'll see you next time. Bye,
I
Nancy. I'll see you. I'll see
Thank
you
you.
Tuesday morning.
Amen. Bye.
Bye bye.